Now, for over the last 2 years, the child welfare community has refocused its attention and direction towards prevention, stabilizing and supporting families, and keeping children safe with their parents when possible. Stakeholders, leadership, policymakers have been able to move this conversation, make policies, change programs, in part based on the data and research that shows when you remove a child from his or her parents, that is a known trauma. That child experiences short-term and long-term, lifelong negative impacts. We've been able to push this dialogue further because we've been assessing the reason why families have become involved in the child welfare system. And the majority of cases in the child welfare system is based on allegations of neglect as opposed to abuse. And assessing neglect and understanding neglect, we also know that families become involved in the child welfare system based on poverty triggers. They become involved in the system because they're unable to pay for suitable housing, or they can't afford the rent, or they can't find childcare or daycare to provide for their children as they work at a minimum wage paying job to pay rents that are above their means. That's why families get involved in the child welfare system. And as a community, we believe that that's not abuse or neglect, that we should not be removing children from their parents because they're poor. Children are not shopping. They want to remain with their homes and their parents when they're safe. Despite this effort, despite this attention towards prevention, there are still kids being removed from their families. And we know that this is still traumatic to these children. I'm here to ask you today and think about what if we paid the same type of attention and direction for children post-removal? What if the entire system, every element, every moving part worked towards reunification? What if that included the biggest safety net of all, foster system? More specifically, foster parents. What if foster parents were part of the reunification plan? What if from recruiting, training, service providing, case planning, that they were part of the reunification effort to get that child home safely to their parents? What would that look like? How would that change the system for children and families? Let me step back. Let's look at what the current foster parent system is now. Is it serving that purpose for reunification? As we know, it's traumatic to remove a child from their parents. In many of these cases, they're placed in stranger foster care, where that stranger is a stranger to them prior to that placement. That child and family does not know who that stranger is, even if they're the most well-meaning, most loving individual on this planet. It's been shown that they're not mitigating or reducing the trauma and anxiety that child feels being removed from their families. We also have data and research as to what resource parents, foster parents, and children think about the current foster parent system. Foster parents have voiced that they don't feel included, they don't feel understood, they feel that they're not part of the case planning, they feel that parents are violent and dangerous, drug abusers, mentally ill, part of incarcerated, that they physically abuse their children, they're dangerous, and not interested in getting to know parents. They also feel that parents think that they're stealing their children. Parents feel that foster parents are stealing their children, that they are there to take their children and there for the money, that they couldn't create their own families, so they're there taking their children. Parents feel that they're not being heard by foster parents, that they're being judged, that it's a competition. Who gets to the finish line first to either keep the child through adoption or have the child returned? What are children thinking? What are they observing in the system? Children have a division of loyalties. They feel divided. When they're with their foster parent, they're afraid to mention their parents because that's going to hurt their foster parents' feelings. They're afraid that this may result in another placement change, that they may feel isolated, and they don't vocalize that they miss their parents. And when they're with their parents, they feel bad about saying that they like their foster parents, that they love their foster parents, and they feel safe, because they don't want to hurt their parents anymore. They are seeing their parents in this most oppressive moment, and they can't explain to them that they actually feel safe. So what happens? Children internalize this anxiety and guilt. They hold it within. And there's no therapeutic component now discussing this relationship between the foster parent and parent because there is no relationship. There's no therapeutic component to ask the child to be able to talk about this. So what's happening is it's compounding the anxiety, the trauma within that child. So the current foster parent system is not designed to support reunification. It's designed to actually have two separate tracks, two separate worlds, isolating the child from both worlds. What if we ask the foster parent to be a resource parent? What if we change the concept? Resource parent has become a concept and a program in many jurisdictions. The name denotes that you're a resource to that child and parent. You're part of that case planning. You're part of that system. Versus foster parent, where you're separate and independent. It denotes that you've taken this child and you need to function separate. You're not included in the initial world because that world was so bad. What if the resource parent became part of the case planning? Then resource parents would not feel disengaged. They would be supported. They would be asked from training and recruitment that you need to meet with the parents. You can support the parents. That would break down the barriers and the obstructions that have been built up. Those stereotypes, they're not abusive, they're not dangerous, they're not violent parents. They're good people who love their children. And parents would feel less threatened. They would feel included. They would model. They would assist. They would be involved in the child care. They would communicate as two loving adults working towards the same mission to protect this child. And children would observe this relationship. They would see two loving individuals working towards their goals to keep this child safe. And that would reduce anxiety. It would reduce guilt. So I have two stories, two cases of mine where I observed a relationship between a resource parent and a parent. The first story is of Faith and Amy. Faith was a mother of three, still a mother of three girls that were under 10. Faith struggled with drug addiction and she was arrested many times. Upon her last arrest, she lost her job and she fell into hard times and she was evicted from her apartment. That's how she entered into the child welfare system. Her children were removed and placed with Amy, the resource parent, who was a stranger to the children and to Faith. This devastated Faith, as it does to many of our parents and moms, and Faith started to shut down. So much so that she couldn't attend visits. She went to 2 or 3 at most, and then started to not show up. She always intended to go. She would do the 24-hour confirmation call. She even got on the bus to go to this 1-hour visit at the agency office, but would get off 2 or 3 stops before. She just could not make it to the visit. And this was troubling and confusing to everyone involved. And at the next court hearing, the judge asked, "Why are you not going to visits? What's wrong with you? Don't you miss your kids? Don't you love them? When you do anything to see your kids, they need to see you. They're at the office." And Faith has completely shut down. She couldn't answer, and she was vacant. She was defeated. I had been working with her and through social workers and having a relationship. I understood and knew what was happening. And my understanding, as I expressed to the court, was that Faith was obsessed, could only focus on the goodbye of the visit. She was so paralyzed thinking about the last 5 to 10 minutes of that visit and saying goodbye again and again, reliving that separation, that she couldn't get to the visit because she was so shattered and it was impossible for her to get to that visit. And I asked the court and made a request that we need to be more creative with the family time and visitation. What if we asked the resource parent, Amy, to provide visitation? Different types of visitation at the park, at McDonald's, school activities, medical activities. This way, Faith wasn't so focused at the bookends of the hello and the goodbye. She could just have family time. She could experience a meaningful moment with her girls. And the judge denied our request. None of the other attorneys supported our application. And it was also raised that Amy was adamantly opposed to this visitation request. She said, "I don't want Faith to know my face, name, or location. I don't want anything to do with her. and that was the end of that request. Soon after this hearing, Amy got into a car accident with all 3 girls that resulted in a serious back injury to the middle daughter, and she was placed in a wheelchair. That was one of the worst calls I've ever received, and still absolutely one of the worst calls I've ever had to make to another mother to let her know her daughter was in a wheelchair. We had an emergent hearing, and this shifted things. It clearly moved things where we had to think about, what are we doing here for these 3 girls? And that was the first time Faith spoke up in court and said, I may have done drugs, but I never abused drugs in front of my daughters. I was never high. I may have been arrested, but I was never arrested my daughters. And I sure as hell never put my daughter in a wheelchair. Amy was also at this hearing, and she asked to meet Faith. She said, I need to say sorry. I need to meet her. At this first meeting, they became instant friends and allies. Something changed. Amy saw Faith as a mother, but as Amy voiced in court and many times after, said, I saw us as 2 human beings with 2 souls, loving 3 girls, and I knew I had to help Faith get her girls back. Amy started attending court hearings, and she was her biggest advocate. She started taking her to medical appointments, picking her up, school appointments. If she got a wheelchair ramp assigned to her house, she made sure that Faith had a wheelchair disability option for her apartment. They became inseparable and a unit. Amy would sit behind us at court, often with her hand on Faith's shoulder, and that was how that case changed. And the girls were returned to Faith, and now 10 years later, they're doing well. Faith and Amy are still friends and support each other. Now with Hope and Teresa, our other case, Teresa got into the child welfare system as a foster parent, hoping to adopt girls. She had 2 boys, and she was happy with her life, but she really wanted to complete her family. And 2 girls happened to be placed with her under 10. And the agency said to Teresa, you're going to adopt them. You're going to have these girls because Hope, mom, was incarcerated, never getting out, and dad is an abusive alcoholic and homeless and is not working with the system, not complying. And so you're going to get your girls and adopt them. But what Teresa did not know about Hope was that Hope didn't agree with that plan. She completed her programs early, she was released in pretrial intervention, and she found employment and housing soon after her release. And it all signaled to all of us that this was no longer a termination case, this was a reunification case, and these girls were coming back home to Hope. This was never voiced to Teresa, but Teresa started to pick up on this. She started to know that maybe she wasn't going to adopt these girls. So she started coming to court and try to make a connection with Hope. And Hope was open to this, but she was really embarrassed at court because she was still in her orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, and didn't feel like a mother, didn't feel like a person. She wasn't being seen. And one of my favorite observations was seeing Hope and Teresa in the hallway right next to a court hearing, where Teresa yelled out, hey Hope, the girls are doing great, spelling bee 100, best scores at soccer team, I just want to let you know. And just like that, Hope turned around and said, hey, that's great. Are they still into spaghetti? Do they still love meatloaf? And they started talking over all the noise in the courtroom. They became instant friends. They became part of their support system. Teresa was there not wanting to give the girls up, but she knew in her heart that that's where they wanted to be. They never stopped wanting to be with their mother. 12 years later, they're still together. They're still a team. Hope has her girls. They're graduated. They're both in college. And they have Teresa as part of their support system. They have an incredible, loving, supportive system that has provided for these both women and the families. I can tell you dozens of stories where I've seen this happen, either through a horrific accident or a letter through a diaper bag sent through a visit or a perchance meeting at the courthouse. What I'm here today to ask is, can we make this not about chance meetings? What if we change the system where it's a requirement to consider resource parents as part of the process for reunification from day one? From day one, if we ask resource parents and let them know that you can be part of a bigger picture, that this is an opportunity to bring families together, and you can be part of this and be part of these children's lives to better those families, and you will not lose the children. You're gaining a family. This is an incredible gift that you can do. And I believe, as I've seen for over 15 years, that this can happen. We can have more stories of hope and faith. Thank you.